Hello Year 5, welcome to your next English lesson. So today we're going to be exploring the end of the book and using the skills that you have learnt over the last 2 days. We're going to look at writing a sequel, so not a full sequel in terms of rewriting an entire book, but we're going to have a go answering some questions by looking at a sequel based on the book that we've been looking at Tuesday. So let's have a quick recap of the book, okay? So I have got my trusty book here, so you might want to have a copy of the pictures out in front of you. So we know that the book starts on Tuesday evening, okay, around 8 p.m. And to start off with, the frogs are very normal. There's nothing going on with the frogs. They are perfectly fine. And at some point, these frogs start to fly. Now, as we can see from this picture here, okay, if you can see it, okay, so the frogs, okay, are actually starting to fly through the sky and actually start attacking and chasing the birds that are already up in the sky. Okay, now here in this pictures, okay, here they're now flying over the houses. Okay, so it's now late at night. People are in bed. Well, most people are in bed. We'll have a look at it in the rest of our story. And they're starting to fly over the houses. Now, this poor gentleman here at 20 past 11, okay, is minding his own business, eating his sandwich when he sees some flying frogs. And if you look very, very closely, you might actually see there's actually a flying frog. He's waving his little paw, hand, flipper. Weird webbed foot. Let's go with webbed foot. I don't think he has flippers or paws. Waving at the man eating his sandwich through his kitchen window. Now, for those unfortunate people who had their washing up on the washing lines, their washing is now gone and it is now covered in frog slime and is flying through the sky. And here we start to see that one of the groups of frogs actually start to fly through the window of somebody's house. Now, we find out that in that house is a poor, nice lady who was having a nice little snooze watching her television and has her TV taken over by frogs. Then at 4:30 a.m. we introduce Rusty. Rusty is our trusty little dog who decides to go and chase and have fun and play with these frogs. Okay, so there he is. He's busy having a nice little run, being chased with some flying frogs on some lily pads. And then at some point earlier on in that morning, something within our story changes and you start to see these frogs look like they're dropping from the sky. So rather than saying it's raining cats and dogs, maybe we say it's raining frogs and lily pads this time around. And here we can see the frogs have started to return to normal, and after returning to normal, they return back to their pond. And this poor little froggy here does not look impressed that his flying adventure is over. Okay, and then here we had our detective scene, okay, that we looked at when we wrote our police paper reports. So the next page in our story, okay, looks like this. Okay, so we have, it's Tuesday at 7:58 p.m. and here is the next picture, okay, within our book. Okay, so you can see it on the screen. What I do is pause the video and just tell me what you can observe. What can you see in our picture? Okay, well, spoiler alert, this is what we see on the next page. So the following Tuesday in the evening, we've gone from flying frogs to flying pigs, okay? So this is going to be the basis for our sequel that we are going to look at today, okay? So what we're going to do is I'm going to have a quick recap through the story, just the way I've done now. I'm going to move you a little bit further away so you can see it, but you might want a copy of the pictures of the book in front of you. And what we need to do is we need to kind of generate some ideas of how we could change parts of the story. So I am going to change me into a full screen mode so you can see my beautiful face. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the picture book up in front of you. So you might want to have the pictures in front of you so that you can see. So we start off with our first page, okay, so Tuesday evening around 8 in the evening, and this is our opening page. So here we have our 3 frogs that are looking up. So we need to think about, well, what could we change to the opening part of our story? We obviously aren't going to have pigs sitting on wooden logs. We're not going to have them in water. We're not going to have them on lily pads. So have a think about where might we find pigs? What are they going to be doing? Are they going to be rolling around in mud? Are they going to be outside on a farm? Are they going to be eating a mouthful of hay and straw? Could they be sticking their head into a pig trough and having themselves a nice little bit of dinner? Okay, so Our next page is then going to be, we have our flying frogs, okay? So what we need to consider is, well, how are we going to do it so that we now have our flying pigs, okay? So the pigs might be coming up, they might go over the fences, they might come out of the doors of the huts they might be living in, they might be covered in mud, they might still have mouthfuls of straw in their mouth. So we need to have a think of how we might start that part of the story with our flying pigs. Okay, here we have them flying through our midnight sky. Okay, now it might be a case of that you change it so they're not actually chasing birds. Okay, it could be something else that's up in the sky. Maybe they start flying into trees. Okay, it could be a case that maybe it's going to be pigeons or different types of birds. Okay, because farms are going to be further out from a city, so they might actually be flying across fields. Have a think about what you might find in fields that could give them something good to chase. It could even be deer, maybe deer that go marching and jumping through the cornfields. Here we then have them flying over the houses. Now this is part of the story that we could keep the same. Obviously they're not going to come flying in on lily pads, okay? But they might have the straw attached to their feet. They might be covered in a little bit of mud. They might have dropped off some additional farm bits that might have been stuck to them. But the concept of them flying over the houses, we can keep the same. Now, here we have 11:21 p.m. and there is this poor man eating his sandwich in the kitchen. Now, what you might want to think about is, who else could potentially be awake at that time of night? Could it be a mum who is up feeding a baby who is crying or needs a feed? Is it going to be a teenager who should be in bed sleeping and instead is up raiding the fridge stealing food? Obviously, we don't steal food, but it could be that. So you need to have a think about how we could change that character there as well. Then we have this part of the story where we go through and they take the laundry. Now here we have the bed sheets. But obviously we don't just hang bed sheets, do we? So it could be that maybe the frogs go flying through some shorts and some t-shirts. You might find that you end up with a pig that ends up having a hoodie attached to him. It could be that someone has a pair of trousers or shorts that get stuck on their head. Or it could be that they end up with 2 pairs of matching socks on all 4 of their trotters. So have a think about what different types of laundry we can hang up in here that's going to help form the next part of our story. For example, we have this little froggy here who seems to have a bedsheet attached around his neck like a flying cape. Now what this could be is this could be a scarf that could have been hanging up. This could be a pair of trousers that's maybe stuck on their head instead, and the 2 legs are flapping away in the wind. Now here in this part we have them so that the frogs actually started coming into the house. Now here we have the frogs coming through the fireplace. I don't think we're going to fit pigs through the fireplace. So we need to think of different ways that the pigs might be able to enter into the house. Now it could also be an open window. It could be an open door. It could be maybe that there is a dog flap or a cat flap, so maybe one of the pigs might actually get stuck. So we need to think about different ways that they could sneak into the house, because I don't think a pig's going to fit through a chimney. Now here we have our poor old lady who's just having a nice little chill when she's watching the TV. Now, she might not be the only one that's up late at night. Again, we could go with the same theme of maybe being a child or a teenager. Maybe they've fallen asleep playing a video game. Maybe they've fallen asleep doing their homework in front of the TV, or maybe they've fallen asleep eating their dinner, okay? And here, rather than having the frog watching the TV, maybe the frog could be, the pig could be eating up the homework, obviously because pigs will eat anything. It could be you might find the pig sat there playing the video games and has picked up the video game control. So we need to have a think about how we change that part. Then we have 4:38 a.m. This is when we introduce Rusty. And Rusty is being chased by the flying frogs. But we might not want to do a dog this time. We might want to think about another animal that might be around. It could be that maybe there might be some mice or some rats that are running around on the street. It could be a lone fox that's maybe rooting through the dustbins late at night. So we need to think of how we can change that part of the story. Here, obviously, we have the frogs. The frogs start coming down and they start falling, so their flying powers have started to disappear. So if these frogs are going to start dropping in people's yards, they might start bouncing up and down on people's trampolines. They might end up in a fish pond. They might get stuck up a tree. So we need to have a think about how that bit needs to change. So think about how we could change that so it's more relevant to pigs. Now here, obviously, the pigs start walking back to their ponds. Obviously, the frogs somehow need to find their way back to their farm where they belonged, okay? It could be a case of they're hounded up by farmers. It could be a case of they're rounded up by other people, or they just find their own way all the way back. But it might be a case if they follow the destruction of all the clothing and the straw and the mud that's left behind. And that leads us on to our investigation scene. Well, when it was the frogs, we found lily pads. So we need to leave some form of clue behind that's going to suggest there were flying pigs. So again, we've referenced a lot of mud and a lot of straw or food pellets that pigs are fed. So we might find that maybe we find lots of straw and mud. It could be trotter prints that are left on the ground as well. So we need to have a think about how we would suit that investigation scene to suit flying pigs instead, okay? So that was a quick recap of our story. So I'm now going to get rid of my beautiful face as full screen. There we go. So your challenge for the lesson is using our modal verbs and adverbs of possibility we've looked at over the last 2 days. You are going to create sentences that are going to form your sequel. So I'm not asking you to write a full-blown story, but we are going to write specific sentences that's going to link to different parts of the story and how we're going to change it. And you are going to use your modal verbs and adverbs of possibilities to help phrase these sentences. So the first thing you need to think of is, what do you think would happen in a sequel to Tuesday? Well, obviously, looking at the last picture, we might have a repeating incident of having flying pigs, okay? So we could use various words from our modal verbs here and our adverbs of possibility to help phrase that sentence. We need to have to think about what characters are going to be involved. We know that we might have changed the man eating his sandwich. We know that we might have changed the old lady that was sitting at her TV. We also are going to change the animals that were involved in being chased as well. So we need to think about the different characters involved and what different events. So it might not be a case of that you have a teenager in the kitchen eating the sandwich. It could be maybe the teenager's got home late and is brushing their teeth in the bathroom upstairs and the pigs fly past the window. So we can utilise different parts of the house. So have a think about the different characters and the different placements that they might be. And then what do you think could be the title of the sequel? So obviously we know it's the following Tuesday, so we could add a different word. Maybe we could change the title. And can you think of more than one idea of the titles? So you can have a play around and see if you can create some different titles or even some different events. You might find that you might want to write slightly different examples for a sequel. So rather than it being flying pigs, you could think of something else that could happen on the following Tuesday. So I would like you to have a go at thinking about those questions. And then once you've had a go at writing those up, I want you to think about whether your book would be popular and why. So think about what you particularly enjoyed about looking at our book, okay, of Tuesday, and think about how you might like your story to be rephrased if you were to do it as a sequel as well. You might even want to consider the front picture. So here on the front picture we had the dog, so obviously this is Rusty. So it could be a case if we were to change it to a fox maybe raiding through some bins, you'd have some bins on the front cover and you'd maybe have a fox that's looking up at the sky. So obviously the front part of our story sets the scene. Equally, you could change the timing of when this happens as well, but obviously we know that it's going to be at night time, okay? So we can keep that concept the same. Now, what I would like you to do is I would like you to have a go at writing those sentences. However, for those of you that need to be challenged a little bit further, I would like you to make sure you include some multi-clausal sentences. Now, we have looked at multi-clausal sentences every day since September. So rather than writing simple sentences, I would like you to create a paragraph for each question, summarising the characters in the events and what the sequel's going to be and your different titles. And I would like to make sure you include as many of those modal verbs and adverbs of possibilities. Once you've written your sentences and you have a paragraph for each one, go through and underline where you have used those modal verbs and adverbs so that I know where to look for them when I come and have a look at your work. Okay, so you will need to come back to this video and pause it here so that you can see the questions. But on this slide, just to help you, I'm just going to move my face so you can see it properly. Here are the 2 slides from our different lessons we looked at when we looked at the adverbs and modal verbs. So this just shows you the likeliness of from less certain to certain for our adverbs that you could use, and also our modal verbs. If you think you can challenge yourself and have a go at adding the 3 different challenge words we used in our previous lesson, please have a go at using those as well. Okay, so have a go answering those questions to our new sequel, and then when you send your work through, I'll have a nosy and I will send some feedback to you. Okay, have fun, Year 5.